We've got to be fair, right? I don't want to make a video like this, because in my heart of hearts I want to believe in the upward potential of guys that are prospects in the Vancouver Canucks system. I was a believer of Hunter Shinkaruk for far too long. I was a believer in Jordan Subban for far too long. I was a believer of Oli Yo freaking Levy for far too long. That when it comes to this prospect, I don't want to make this video, but we just made a video talking about Kirby Dach and whether or not he's a bust. Let's talk about Jonathan Lekkerimaki and whether or not the correct quote-unquote course of action with him and his career is to potentially explore a trade. Now, you may be asking, Lego, what? That comes out of nowhere. What are you talking about? Trading away Jonathan Lekkerimaki? Here's the thing. When it comes to Vancouver Canucks trade talk, I'd say there's one guy that has sort of dominated the field over the past few days when thinking about names that Vancouver has been linked to, and that happens to be Seattle Kraken forward Shane Wright. Now, this ain't necessarily a Wright for Lekkerimaki trade video. I just wanted to talk about what Lekkerimaki is and where the conversations have gone down the past little while. Because for Lekkerimaki, as we've already discussed, this is a guy who is entering that stage of his career where he kind of needs to be an NHL player. Like, he'll be 22 by the time the regular season begins. He's turning 22 in 6 days. And if this is a guy who, at 22 years old, is not able to string together 40-plus National Hockey League games and look like a guy who belongs in the league, chances are the likelihood that he becomes a full-time NHL player long-term goes significantly down the drain. That's not to say it's impossible. Sometimes guys can be full-time AHL guys who are tweeners in the National Hockey League for years and years and years, and then by 26, 27, they have a full NHL season. Justin Danforth, I think, is the main dude that was able to showcase that as a later bloomer NHL athlete. But this is really, really rare. Extraordinarily rare for a guy to become a full-time National Hockey League player after not being an NHL player at the age of 28 or 29. Jonathan Lekkerimaki is entering uncharted territory for top prospects if he is not an NHL player by the time this upcoming season comes around. And based off of what we've seen over the past 12 months or so, I just don't know if he has the chops to be a full-time guy. What with the injuries and the limited sample size, he only played 34 hockey games last season. That's not great for a guy who was 21, in need of some serious development and upward progression. If you take a look at the Canucks subreddit, this post was made by Nux Baby earlier this morning. Why does it feel inevitable for Lekkerimaki to get only 1 goal in 5 games, ultimately disappoint in training camp, go to Abbotsford, get 30 or 40 games, and ultimately bust as a prospect? What are your expectations? I feel like no one really expects this guy to get back on track with his development this year to become a top 6 player, and he has no floor. Am I wrong on that part? I haven't watched any Abbey games. Now, we should probably say, you should watch Abbey Canucks games. Support local media. We need it more than ever before. But he was a pretty productive Abbotsford Canuck this previous season, 20 points in 21 games, including 13 goals. He's always been productive in the Abbotsford Canucks system, even though he has had very limited overall gameplay in that league. It's interesting because I feel like this sentiment, even though it is negative, I don't think it's absurdly rare. Top comment on this post says, Lekkerimaki is likely going to disappoint this year. He's coming off of surgery. He won't be able to train enough this offseason to work on the skating and strength issues that have plagued him so far. Fortunately, he isn't eligible for waivers this season, so next year's training camp is really make it or break it time. Regardless, he'll probably end up just being a dude with one elite tool that can't impact the game in enough ways to deserve the top 6 power play 1 deployment that he needs. Now, this is a lot more lukewarm of a take, saying that Lekkerimaki probably will have an NHL career, but it's going to be kind of difficult for him to get that top 6 power play 1 deployment that will ultimately allow him to get the points to justify his role in the league. It's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, is it not? Lekkerimaki scores goals, therefore Lekkerimaki gets top 6 in power play 1 time, therefore Lekkerimaki gets more goals. And if he doesn't get the goals in the first place, then he's not going to get that top 6 power play 1 time, which is going to prevent him from getting more goals in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th place. Level Loss says that Lekkerimaki has already got the hardest part down. That shot is money. The problem is the rest of his game still looks like a guy who just learned to skate yesterday. If he can figure out how to not be a ghost 90% of his shifts, maybe there is something there, but I'm not holding my breath. Another reply says, I would love to see him on a line with Novotny and Braden Coots, maybe even in Abbotsford. I know the timelines don't exactly match up. And then you also have to consider the fact that Lekkerimaki has to contend with Coots, Ratu, and Sasson for one of 2 spots which aren't basically guaranteed. The top 6, which is where he needs to be, is basically stacked in 5 to 6 positions? Okay, I don't know about that. Really? Okay, another reply says, yeah, it's not stacked. You got Pedersen, Rossi, Besser, DeBrusk as locks for the top 6, but these guys aren't really like, wow, what a crazy top 6. Like, it's just, these are the guys that are there. Lekkerimaki is an average skater, not physical, poor defensively, doesn't skate into scoring areas at an NHL level to utilize his lethal shot. The chances Lekkerimaki turns out are quite low. And this, of course, is kind of a tough thing to talk about because I know a lot of Canucks fans, myself included, want to see this guy become what he could become. 30 goals every year, 40 goals in one really great season, and a player that just has a wicked release, one-timer, power play specialist. It's rare to make that combination of skills work in the National Hockey League. So few players have done it without developing other parts of their games, and Lekkerimaki doesn't seem to be like that special guy that can make it work at this stage of his career. How far are you willing to go for him to inevitably be seen as a trade candidate? He has some value, you could say. 15th overall draft pick back in 2022. I really admired the pick back when it was made. He was one of the top goal scorers in that 2022 draft class after all, and he showed definitely that there were more skills to his arsenal that made him worthwhile of being drafted first round back in the day. But the fact that he hasn't really shown much in terms of longevity and off-puck play, that's also concerning. So ultimately, when it comes to this Shane Wright conversation, to wrap it back up to everything we've been talking about last week, there are already takes going out there and being posted, hey, Lekkerimaki is better than Shane Wright. Another reply says, the problem with your opinion is that there is not a shred of evidence to support it. By every objective measure that exists, Wright is a better player than Lekkerimaki. Then somebody replies, this is all the evidence I need. Look at that stick twirl, where Lekkerimaki came in and scored a beautiful shootout goal on Jacob Markstrom and the Devils on Amazon Prime. It's a nice goal, but it's not evidence that he's better than Shane Wright. Far from it. They're just months apart in age, but Lekkerimaki has accomplished very little in the NHL, whereas Wright got 44 points as a rookie just 2 years ago. So at the end of the day, Lekkerimaki, his time, his ability, it's all being questioned here. Is this a guy who's worth waiting for? Is this a guy who actually is going to pan out? I'd say right now, things are looking a lot less optimistic than a year ago. And with this being his 22-year-old season to be, I do question just how far the Canucks are willing to go with Lekkerimaki in his development, and at what point do they decide, okay, maybe it's just more worth it to trade this guy away for a pick or something, make him a trade candidate. He's 15th overall, so there is some pedigree there. If he's the piece that you need in order to make a Shane Wright trade work, I do it personally. But you can let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Lekkerimaki trade, yay or nay? Thoughts in the comment section. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.